Have you ever imagined being publicly humiliated by someone who believes they have absolute power over everything and everyone, and not lifting a finger to defend themselves? That's exactly how this story begins, amidst attentive gazes, awkward silence, and an arrogance that seemed limitless. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you in ways you don't expect. The atmosphere was sophisticated, the kind that exudes money, status, and authority. Well-dressed people, hushed conversations, calculated glances, and at the center of it all, a billionaire known for not tolerating being contradicted, a man accustomed to commanding, deciding, interrupting, humiliating. For him, respect wasn't something offered, but something demanded by the weight of his name, his bank account, and the social position he held. That day, he entered as always, overconfident, a superior smile on his face, and the certainty that no one there would dare confront him. It was then that his eyes fell upon a black woman standing a few meters away, calmly observing everything. She didn't draw attention with her expensive clothes or flamboyant gestures. On the contrary, her posture was discreet, firm, almost too serene for that environment laden with vanity, and perhaps that was precisely what sparked his immediate contempt. Without even asking who she was, without seeking context, the billionaire decided she was invisible, or worse, someone who could be put in her place. The words came sharp, laden with irony and disdain, comments that didn't need to be explicit to hurt because the tone already said it all. He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. He laughed. He made jokes. He questioned her presence there, as if that space didn't belong to him. Around them, people looked away, pretended to fiddle with their phones, adjusted their clothes. No one intervened. No one said anything. The collective silence was almost as cruel as the humiliation itself. Have you ever been through this? Ever felt that sense of injustice when everyone sees something wrong happening but chooses to remain silent? That was exactly the atmosphere. A heavy discomfort in the air, mixed with fear, convenience, and social cowardice. And in the midst of it all, she remained there. She didn't cry. She didn't get upset. She didn't try to explain herself. She just listened. This seemingly small detail began to bother her more than any explosive reaction could have. Encaused, the billionaire interpreted the silence as submission, and that only fueled his arrogance even more. He continued, certain that he was in control, certain that this black woman was just another person who needed to be reminded of her place. Every word he spoke reinforced an old, structural, cruel prejudice, and every passing second made the viewer of this scene think, this won't stay like this, because there was something strange about that silence, something that didn't fit with defeat. It wasn't fear, it wasn't shame, it was waiting, a waiting that no one there seemed to notice yet. The atmosphere remained tense. Glances met, and the feeling that something was about to change grew stronger with each passing second. What do you think goes through the mind of someone who feels untouchable at the exact moment they're making the biggest mistake of their life? Do they realize when they've crossed a point of no return? Or do they only understand when it's too late? It's precisely from that moment that this story begins to take an unexpected turn, and that's when everything changes. As that scene unfolded before everyone, it was impossible not to feel a tightness in my chest. Because, in some way, that humiliation wasn't just about her. It was about many similar stories that happen every day, in different places, with different people, but almost always with the same silence surrounding them. Perhaps, as you listen to this now, some memory has come to mind. A moment when you witnessed something unjust, or even experienced something similar yourself. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Your story may resonate with other people who are also watching. And if this narrative has already sparked something within you, if you felt indignation, empathy, or that feeling that something needs to change, Liking this video is a simple but powerful way to show that this type of content matters. Each like helps this message reach more people, more stories, more consciences that need to be awakened. That's how this space stays alive, bringing accounts that make us reflect and put ourselves in someone else's shoes. Now, if you feel you want to continue following stories like this, full of twists and turns, poetic justice, and truths that aren't always comfortable, subscribing to the channel is like saying, I want to be a part of this. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content, creating a community that doesn't normalize prejudice, abuse of power, and silence in the face of injustice. And while you do that, the scene continues. The atmosphere remains heavy. The billionaire still too confident to realize that something is about to slip out of his control. The black woman remains there motionless, observing every detail, as if she knows that time sometimes works in silence. And it is precisely in this interval between his arrogance and her calm that the story begins to reveal something that no one in that place was prepared to face. In his mind, everything was already decided. The judgment was instantaneous, silent, and cruel, built in seconds from old layers of prejudice he never questioned. For that billionaire, appearance said it all. Skin color said it all. The calm posture, the simple way of dressing, the absence of ostentation. All of this in his mind fit perfectly into a ready-made, comfortable narrative that always placed him on top and others always below. He didn't see a person there. He saw a label. He saw an imaginary hierarchy that only existed because he needed to believe in it, to sustain his own sense of power. In the world he moved in, people were divided between those who command and those who obey, between those who decide and those who accept. And, without realizing it, he had become a hostage to this logic. Every decision he made, every word he spoke was influenced by this false sense of superiority. It was as if money had shaped not only his lifestyle, but the very way he saw others. And when someone didn't fit the mold he respected, they were automatically relegated to a lesser place, invisible, subordinate. He believed that the black woman was there by chance, perhaps someone who had entered the wrong room, perhaps someone who didn't understand how things work. In his mind, it didn't make sense that she was there by merit, by authority, or by her own choice. That possibility simply didn't exist. And that's where the hidden truth of this story lies. Prejudice rarely presents itself as explicit hatred. Often, it manifests as absolute certainty, as a silent conviction that the other doesn't belong. While he remained secure in this internal narrative, the implicit social inequality was laid bare in small gestures, in the tone of voice, in the way of interrupting, in the contemptuous smile. He didn't need to raise his hand to hurt. It was enough to look as if noticing something out of place. And the most disturbing thing is that for him, it seemed normal. That's how it had always been. That's how it had always worked. Or at least that's what he believed. But there were details that didn't match the story he had created. Small signs that went unnoticed by those who only looked at the surface. The way she observed everything attentively, without haste. The way she didn't seek approval, nor tried to justify herself. Her silence wasn't empty. It was dense, laden with awareness, with control, with someone who understood more about that environment than she let on. But the billionaire didn't see it. Because when the mindset is trapped in arrogance, the vision becomes limited. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this part of the story isn't just about social or racial prejudice. It's about a transformation of mindset. About how decisions based on appearances build silent downfalls. He believed he was in control, but in reality, he was just repeating old patterns, automatic decisions, judgments inherited from a system he never challenged. And this creates an impact that goes far beyond that specific moment. It creates blindness. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of that public scene, something was amiss. Some people began to notice. A glance exchanged here, a different silence there. Some perceived that the woman wasn't reacting like someone cornered. There was too much firmness, too much a presence, as if she was simply waiting for the right moment, not to take revenge, but to allow the truth to reveal itself. Because some revelations don't need to be announced. They simply happen at the exact moment when the other person's pride has gone too far to be saved. The billionaire, for his part, continued to believe he was winning, that he was asserting authority, that he was teaching a lesson. Little did he know that, at that very moment, he was digging something irreversible. Because when someone constructs a false narrative about another, ignores signs, disregards reality, and relies solely on their own arrogance, the clash with the truth is usually devastating. And the most ironic thing is that often this truth was there all along, visible to those who knew how to look beyond appearances. The journey of this story begins to change precisely here, in this space between what he thought he knew and what he refused to see, between the image he created of her and who she really was. And it is in this silent interval that the greatest turning points usually occur, when reality begins to challenge fantasy, when apparent power begins to crack from within. If all of this resonates with you in any way, leave a comment at the end of this section. That makes sense to me. And it was precisely at that point that her silence began to weigh more than any word spoken until then. There was no scream, no hasty defense, no attempt to explain or justify her own presence. She didn't ask permission to exist in that space. She simply remained, and this remaining, so simple in appearance, carried a force that the billionaire couldn't interpret, because he was used to predictable reactions. Fear, submission, visible embarrassment. Her calm silence completely broke the script he knew. Each second without a response seemed to disarm him, even if he didn't realize it yet. The discomfort began to grow silently, almost invisibly, but real. Some people around him started to observe more closely, not because she reacted, but precisely because she didn't. There was something about that self-control that didn't match the fragile image he had created in his mind. And the more he spoke, the more evident this contradiction became. The billionaire's psychological error deepened with each new sentence. He believed he was reaffirming his power, but in reality, he was exposing himself. When someone needs to repeatedly humiliate others to feel superior, it reveals more about their insecurities than about the other person's supposed inferiority. And he didn't realize that by trying to crush that woman with words, he was only amplifying his own imbalance in front of everyone. Her silence acted as an unsettling mirror. No reaction, no direct confrontation, no spectacle, just presence. And presence, when genuine, is often threatening to those who have built their identity on domination. He began to exaggerate his tone, as if he sensed he was losing something, even without knowing exactly what. His arrogance took on the contours of disguised nervousness. His contemptuous smile began to seem forced, and this did not go unnoticed. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this kind of silence isn't passivity. It's a choice, it's a conscious decision. It's the result of an inner journey that teaches when to speak and when to be silent. Often, those who have real power don't feel the need to prove anything in public. And perhaps that was the most disturbing detail for him. That woman didn't need to react to assert herself. She simply was. Meanwhile, in the emotional backstage of that scene, something was slowly reversing. The attention that had previously been on the billionaire was beginning to shift. Not out of explicit empathy, but out of curiosity, out of bewilderment. People were beginning to sense that there was a hidden truth there, something unspoken, something that had not yet come to light. And when a situation is no longer predictable, control changes hands. The billionaire, without realizing it, fell into the trap of his own ego. The more he tried to diminish himself, the more he revealed his dependence on that power game. He spoke to reaffirm who he was, but each word sounded emptier than the last, because her silence didn't confront him directly, but eroded the foundation of the authority he thought he had. And authority that depends on the humiliation of others is never solid. There was also an even deeper aspect to all of this, the symbolic impact. That black woman, in silence, defied centuries of imposed expectations. She didn't fit the role assigned to her by historical prejudices, and that disrupts. It destabilizes, because it forces the other to confront a reality they have always avoided, a reality where appearance doesn't define position, where money doesn't guarantee dignity, where true power doesn't need to raise its voice. The atmosphere was no longer the same. Something had changed, even though nothing had been officially said. The energy of the scene was shifting, as if everyone was intuitively awaiting an outcome that was still unnamed. And the billionaire continued talking, without realizing that each word was distancing him further from the control he thought he had. He believed he was leading the situation, but in reality he was being led by his own pride. And it is at this point in the journey that the tension completely reverses. Because when someone mistakes silence for weakness, they usually make irreversible mistakes. Her silence was not empty, it was strategic, it was conscious. It was the kind of quietude that precedes revelations capable of completely changing the course of a story. Revelations that don't arrive with noise, but with profound impact. If this part of the story resonated with you, write it in the comments. I'm on this journey too. The moment of revelation didn't arrive with fanfare or dramatic announcement. It emerged, almost discreetly, like everything that is truly true. A seemingly simple detail shifted the entire situation. A person approached her with evident respect, a tone of voice that didn't suggest subservience, a gesture that wasn't casual. A firm, direct greeting without hesitation. And there, in that small movement, something began to fall into place for those who were paying attention. The silence took on a different meaning. Her posture ceased to seem enigmatic and began to be understood as dominance. The atmosphere felt it first. Even before the right words were spoken, the mood shifted. The air grew thicker. Glances shifted more cautiously, as if everyone were mentally recalculating what they had just witnessed. The hidden truth began to reveal itself, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. And when it finally became clear who that woman truly was, there was no room for doubt. She wasn't there by chance. She wasn't a secondary guest. She wasn't someone who needed permission to occupy that space. She was the owner, the boss, the ultimate authority, the one who, directly or indirectly, held real power over decisions that affected the billionaire's own professional life. The impact was immediate. The same man who minutes before had spoken with disdain now seemed smaller, out of place within his own body. The confidence he displayed so easily began to crumble before everyone's eyes. There was no shouting, no explicit revenge. There was something much stronger. The silent realization of an irreversible mistake. Collective embarrassment spread like a wave. Some people lowered their heads, others pretended not to have heard anything before. Silence returned, but now with a different weight, a weight of conscience. Poetic justice didn't need to be announced, it presented itself. The black woman remained serene, firm, without altering her tone, because those who have real power don't need to change their posture when the truth comes to light. But the billionaire, he did begin to move differently. His body betrayed his mind. His gestures lost precision. His speech became restrained. He realized too late that he had placed himself in an impossible position to sustain. And all this because of decisions made based on shallow judgments, a limited mentality, a worldview that confused money with absolute authority. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this moment isn't just about a social upheaval, it's about internal transformation, about how a journey built on arrogance exacts a high price when reality sets in. The billionaire didn't just lose control of the situation, he lost something deeper, the narrative that sustained his own identity. Before everyone, it became clear that the power he believed he possessed was fragile, dependent on the ignorance and silence of others. In the emotional backstage of that revelation, each person present mentally reviewed their own stance. Some remembered the complicit silence, others the cowardice disguised as neutrality, because when the truth comes out, it exposes not only those who directly erred, but also those who chose not to intervene. And that is one of the most uncomfortable revelations in this story. Its authority didn't just embarrass the billionaire, it exposed an entire system of silent complicity. The most powerful thing is that she didn't need to say, "I am." The environment responded for her. Respect came spontaneously, almost automatically, as if everyone understood that they had failed in their initial assessment. Her journey to get there wasn't visible in external details, but it was present in the way she occupied the space. And this dismantles one of the greatest social illusions, the idea that power always announces itself before manifesting. Sometimes it's simply there, waiting for the right moment to be recognized. The billionaire tried to compose himself, adjust his posture, correct his tone. But there are moments when correction is no longer possible, because it's no longer about words, but about impact. What was said before could not be unsaid. His gaze was no longer one of superiority, but of calculation, of someone trying to understand the consequences. And that's a crucial point in this story. When the truth comes to light, it not only changes the scene, it changes destiny. The atmosphere remained heavy, but now with a different kind of expectation. It was no longer curiosity, it was anticipation, something still needed to happen, something that no longer depended on titles or positions, but on choices. Because after the mask falls, all that remains is the reaction to one's own fall. And it is precisely in this space, between the revelation and the response, that the story begins to move towards a conclusion that no one had foreseen there. If this turning point impacted you, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. The fall wasn't noisy nor immediate, but it was inevitable. The billionaire began to understand the magnitude of the mistake he had made precisely when he realized he no longer had control over his own image. The respect he believed to be automatic vanished without warning. There were no applause, no direct confrontations, but something far more painful happened. People began to see him differently, and when perspectives change, status no longer sustains anything. He tried to regain his composure, adjust his speech, perhaps even feign cordiality, but the truth had already been exposed, and there was no going back. The authority he had previously displayed was based on a fragile construct, sustained by fear, intimidation, and arrogance. When that crumbles, only emptiness remains, and that is precisely what began to reveal itself. The man who considered himself untouchable was now grappling with the weight of his own embarrassment. The consequences came in layers. First, a different kind of silence all around. Then, the subtle distance from those who previously approached out of convenience. Forced respect gave way to critical observation, and behind the scenes, decisions began to be reviewed. Partners reconsidered alliances. People who previously agreed with everything began to question. Because when someone publicly exposes who they really are, the impact spreads far beyond that specific moment. It affects reputations, trajectories, and entire paths. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this story isn't just about the downfall of an individual, but about the deconstruction of a mindset. The billionaire didn't just lose social standing or influence, he lost the narrative of superiority that had accompanied him for years. And this loss hurts more than any material consequence, because it forces him to confront something he always avoided, his own humanity, full of flaws, prejudices, and poor decisions. Meanwhile, The black woman stood firm, without celebrating his downfall, without resorting to humiliation in response, without needing to prove anything. Her dignity remained intact from beginning to end, and that is perhaps the greatest lesson of this journey. Power that doesn't need to be imposed is the most solid. Respect that doesn't demand fear is the most lasting. She didn't win because she had a higher position or a stronger name, but because she had character. And character cannot be bought, inherited, or imposed. Prejudice, when exposed, reveals how small the person who harbors it is. Arrogance, when confronted with reality, shows how fragile it is. And money, however many doors it opens, does not guarantee dignity or human greatness. This truth, so simple and so ignored, became evident there, before everyone, without long speeches, without the need for explanation, just by the way each one reacted when the masks fell. The billionaire understood too late that respect isn't measured by bank balances, appearances, or accumulated titles. It's built day by day, in silent choices, in how someone treats those who seemingly can't offer anything in return. And when that foundation is corrupted, the fall isn't a question of if, but of when, because no structure sustained by contempt remains standing for long. History leaves a mark precisely for this reason. It forces those who observe it to ask themselves where they have placed their own value. What kind of judgment have they trusted? How many times has someone been underestimated for not fitting into a superficial standard? This reflection doesn't just point fingers at the billionaire, it affects us all. Because, at some level, we are all called to review our attitudes, mindsets, and decisions. And the feeling that remains is not one of simple victory, but of learning. A learning that disturbs, transforms, and invites change. Because true poetic justice lies not only in the downfall of those who humiliate, but in the silent elevation of those who remain upright, even when everything around them tries to provoke the opposite. It is this reversal that leaves deep and lasting marks. If this story made you think, leave a comment below. That made me think. If you've made it this far, it's because this story resonated with you in some way, perhaps through identification, perhaps through indignation, perhaps because at some point in your own journey you've seen something similar happen, or even experienced it firsthand. If it makes sense for you to continue reflecting on themes such as dignity, choices, mindset, and poetic justice, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to keep this conversation alive. Here, each story is designed to provoke real reflection, the kind that keeps echoing even after the video ends. And if you want to leave a sign that you've made it to the end, write it here in the comments. This message was for me. This helps create a space for genuine exchange among viewers, because many people read the comments and recognize themselves in them as well. Feel free to like the video if this connection resonated with you. It's a small gesture, but it shows that this type of content deserves to continue reaching more people. There's a video over here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into this reflection. Click on it and continue reading with me there.